If we maintained the same rules from the previous system and applied them to XRP, would that be enough to negate the fragmentation issue that we come up with? What is the maximum amount of times you can use an XRP per day? Remember that just because XRP settles transactions in 3 to 5 seconds doesn't mean that on the 6th second of that transaction, they reuse the same XRP. That's not going to be something that banks do. They don't want to be that close. They don't want to play it that close. It's too dangerous. What if something goes wrong? Then the whole system collapses. They're going to want a buffer in between transactions. So what's that buffer? How do we calculate that buffer? Could this be another thing that we can contribute in a white paper to decide what that buffer should be? We even alluded to this in the last white paper where we used T in one of the equations as the time duration of the transaction. And so this is a real factor. This is the biggest variable on the amount of times you can reuse a token in this new AMM instant settlement environment. And I'm aware that this is all crazy. The words that are coming out my mouth is all a bit mind-blowing. You might have to watch this again. I'm trying to not make it really complicated, and also I'm just really excited. So I'm doing my best here. So we have our mission set out for us. We have to figure out what the velocity of the settlement asset is to be. What do the Bank of International Settlements and the IMF suggest it needs to be? Is there anything there that we can use to compare the old system to the new system? Is it going to be entirely new rules? What's the deal? And if we can figure out that XRP does in fact move at a certain speed, we can also then use that to compare against the cost of fragmentation, then compare that against multi-currency AMMs and say which one seems like the path of least resistance. And interestingly, it becomes a direct fork in the road. Do we not choose XRP, or is XRP chosen as just naturally as a routing hub? Meaning lots of XRP would be needed to be pre-funded, frozen, locked into these AMM trading pairs. Then we can start to have really good estimates on what the price of an XRP would need to be and how much XRP would need to be out of circulation. What I'm not suggesting here, I don't want people to get too crazy excited, is that freezing these accounts is going to be a massive price driver. Remember, there are a few factors and variables going on here. The actual act of taking the XRP out of circulation and putting them in these corridors is a price driver. It's a supply shock creator. That's where all of the legitimacy of the supply shock theory come into play. However, the speed of the XRP is the most important thing, because if the XRP is fast, less XRP needs to be taken out of circulation and you create less of a supply shock moment. Okay, so this is why it's so important for us to dig in to velocity. That is going to be the next episode in this series on the macro.